Have you ever wondered what really pushed Johnny Depp onto the path that made him one of the most unique actors of our time? We often talk about his wild characters, the ones that made him a household name, Captain Jack Sparrow, Edward Scissorhands, Willy Wonka, but before all of that, before the fame, before Hollywood even knew his name, there was a moment, a spark, and that spark came from something you probably wouldn't expect. It came from a Beatles movie. Yes, the Beatles. A simple film that didn't just entertain him. It changed his life. It lit a fire that kept burning for decades. And the funny thing is, most people today don't even talk about this movie anymore. It isn't in the spotlight. It's just a black and white Beatles film that to many looks like a piece of pop culture history. But to Johnny Depp, it was something else entirely. It was freedom. It was rebellion. It was permission to be different. And it was the push he needed to believe that he too could create something that would outlive him. Stick with me here, because by the end of this story, you'll see Johnny Depp in a whole new way. Let's rewind the clock. Picture Johnny, not the global superstar, not the Hollywood A-lister, but just a young kid growing up in Kentucky. His life wasn't glamorous. His family moved around a lot. There was never a sense of stability. Money was tight, and for most of his childhood, Johnny never really felt like he belonged. He wasn't the kind of kid who blended in at school. He wasn't the kind of kid who thought he had it all figured out. And maybe you know that feeling, of being restless, of not fitting in, of wondering where you're supposed to be. That was Johnny's life. Now imagine being that kid and stumbling across something that suddenly makes you feel seen. For Johnny, that moment happened when he watched the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night. On the surface, it's a light-hearted movie about 4 guys running around London, dodging fans, cracking jokes, and playing music. For most people, it's just fun. But to Johnny, it was more than fun. It was everything he had been searching for. He didn't just see 4 musicians. He saw freedom in John Lennon's sarcasm. He saw charm in Paul McCartney's smile. He saw quiet strength in George Harrison's cool presence. And he saw humor in Ringo Starr just being Ringo. Together they weren't superheroes. They weren't untouchable. They were just regular guys who happened to pick up guitars, laugh at authority, and somehow shake the whole world. And in that moment, something clicked inside Johnny. He thought, why not me? Why can't I do something like that? That thought planted a seed. A small one at first, but it grew quickly. And the funny part is, it wasn't even about acting in the beginning. It was about music. After watching the Beatles, Johnny picked up a guitar. He practiced for hours, teaching himself chords, pouring every emotion he had into those strings. Music became his escape, his voice, his way of expressing what he couldn't say in words. And if you've ever fallen in love with something that makes you feel alive, you know exactly what he felt. Of course, life didn't magically turn perfect. Johnny dropped out of school. He joined small bands. He played in smoky dive bars where no one really listened. He struggled. He heard people tell him he'd never make it. He was too different, too unconventional. But you know what kept him going? That spark. That movie. That one night, sitting in front of a screen watching 4 young men prove that anything was possible. It told him that being different wasn't just okay, it was the point. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. When Johnny stumbled into acting, it wasn't planned. He didn't grow up dreaming of being a movie star. In fact, he only went to his first audition because his friend, Nicolas Cage, suggested it. But the thing is, Johnny carried that Beatles-inspired spirit with him into Hollywood. He remembered the rebellion, the humor, the honesty, and he thought, if I'm going to act, I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to let Hollywood put me in a box. That's why his career looks so different from anyone else's. While other actors chased leading man roles and perfect images, Johnny chose the misfits, the outsiders, the characters no one else dared to play. Edward Scissorhands wasn't supposed to be a blockbuster character. Captain Jack Sparrow wasn't supposed to be one of the greatest movie pirates of all time. But Johnny saw something in them, something real. Something that echoed the same kind of rebellious honesty he saw in that Beatles movie. And audiences loved it. Because it wasn't polished. It wasn't predictable. It was human. Here's something most people don't know. Johnny once admitted in an interview that A Hard Day's Night showed him that art doesn't have to be perfect. It can be playful. It can be messy. It can laugh at authority and still be powerful. That lesson shaped every decision he made. Think about it. So many of his roles are characters who don't fit in, who live outside the lines, who refuse to play by the rules. That's Beatles energy right there. And here's a detail that feels almost like fate. Decades later, Johnny didn't just admire the Beatles from afar. He actually became friends with Paul McCartney. Can you imagine? The man who inspired you as a kid, the face you saw on that black and white screen, becoming someone you work with as an adult. In 2012, Johnny even directed one of McCartney's music videos. Talk about a full circle moment. From sitting in a room watching A Hard Day's Night to standing behind the camera helping Paul create again. If that's not proof of how one small spark can shape a life, I don't know what is. And through it all, music never left him. Even when acting brought him fame, when Hollywood pressures weighed heavy, Johnny always turned back to his guitar. It was his anchor, his reminder of where he started. Just like the Beatles, when the world got too loud, music brought him back to himself. That love never faded, so let's think about this for a second. Would Johnny Depp have become the same actor we know today if he never saw that Beatles movie? Would he still have chosen roles that made people scratch their heads at first, but ended up becoming iconic? Or was destiny always leading him there, waiting for that one spark to ignite? That's the big question. When you really stop to think about it, the idea is fascinating. We love to believe that great artists are born destined for greatness, that they would have inevitably found their way to fame no matter what. But life doesn't usually work that way. Life is a combination of small moments, random sparks, and accidents that collide with natural talent and personality. For Johnny Depp, that Beatles movie, A Hard Day's Night, wasn't just entertainment. It was the right piece of inspiration at the right time, a spark that landed in a mind already full of curiosity, longing, and a sense of being different from everyone else around him. Without that spark, who knows if the Johnny Depp we know today would even exist in the same form? Think about Johnny as a kid. He wasn't born into Hollywood. He didn't grow up in some glamorous California home with famous parents. He was just a boy from Kentucky, restless and often moving from place to place. His family struggled with money, and the constant changes in his childhood left him feeling like he didn't quite belong anywhere. That sense of displacement is important. People who feel out of place often search harder for something to anchor them, something that tells them it's okay to be different. When Johnny saw the Beatles on screen, being playful, sarcastic, rebellious, and still loved for it, he finally saw an example of how not fitting in could actually be a strength. Now imagine if he had never seen that. Imagine if his world had stayed limited to the ordinary, to small-town ideas of what life should be, get a job, settle down, don't stand out too much. Without that vision of artistic freedom, maybe he would have accepted that life. Maybe he would have stayed working odd jobs, never daring to pick up his guitar with the same fire. Maybe he would have pushed away his weirdness instead of leaning into it. And if that happened, then the Johnny Depp we know, the one who gave us Jack Sparrow's swagger or Edward Scissorhands' heartbreaking gentleness, might never have existed. Of course, there's another side to this. Some would argue that destiny has a way of pulling us back to where we're supposed to be. Even if Johnny hadn't watched A Hard Day's Night, maybe another spark would have arrived. Maybe he would have heard a different band at the right time. Maybe he would have fallen in love with a book, or seen another movie, or met someone who lit that same fire in him. After all, Johnny already had that restless, creative energy inside him. He already had the soul of someone searching for something bigger. Perhaps the Beatles film wasn't the only path, it was just the one that happened to come first. But there's something about first sparks that feel different. First sparks set the tone. They plant an idea so deeply that it becomes part of who you are. When Johnny saw John, Paul, George, and Ringo laughing their way through life, turning their strangeness into charisma, it gave him permission to dream in a way he might not have otherwise. Sure, another spark might have come along, but it wouldn't have been the same. The Beatles carried a kind of rebellion mixed with joy that matched Johnny's energy perfectly. That exact combination shaped the way he approached art, not just music, but eventually acting too. And it's not just about career choices. It's about identity. Watching that film didn't just make Johnny want to be an artist. It made him believe it was possible to be himself while doing it. That's huge. How many actors in Hollywood try to fit a mold to look like the classic leading man, to play the safe roles that guarantee box office success? Johnny could have done that too. He was handsome enough, talented enough, and Hollywood certainly tried to push him in that direction early in his career. But he resisted. He didn't want to be the next pretty face. He wanted to be the outsider, the one who took risks, the one who chose characters that made people raise their eyebrows and say, "Really? You're going to play that?" That rebellious streak, that willingness to lean into the strange, came straight from that early inspiration. Now let's consider this from another angle. What if Johnny had never gone into acting at all? Remember, his first love was music. After watching the Beatles, he picked up his guitar and poured himself into it. For a while, he really believed he would make it as a musician. He dropped out of school. He played in little bands. He performed in bars where no one cared who he was. If acting hadn't found him, if Nicolas Cage hadn't pushed him toward that first audition, maybe Johnny would have stayed in music. And if that had happened, would the world even know his name today? Would he have been another struggling guitarist, known only in small circles instead of an international star? It's possible. And yet, even in that scenario, the Beatles movie is still at the root of it. Because without it, he might not have picked up that guitar at all. He might not have discovered the love of performance that later carried into his acting career. In that sense, A Hard Day's Night was the domino that tipped over everything else. Acting might have come later by chance, but the courage to chase any artistic path at all came from that spark. But let's not ignore another truth. Inspiration alone isn't enough. A lot of people watch movies and feel inspired. A lot of kids pick up guitars after watching their heroes. Not all of them become Johnny Depp. What made the difference? Persistence, risk-taking, and an unusual tolerance for failure. Johnny kept going even when he was broke, even when no one believed in him, even when he felt lost. That's where destiny and choice intertwine. The Beatles movie lit the fire, but Johnny had to keep feeding it. He had to risk rejection, risk ridicule, and risk carving a path that wasn't safe or guaranteed. That combination of inspiration plus stubbornness is rare, and that's why he stood out. So if we circle back to the question, would Johnny Depp have become the same actor without that movie? The honest answer might be no, not exactly. He might still have been creative. He might still have found success in some way. But the version of Johnny Depp we know, the risk-taker, the oddball, the rebel who gave us characters no one else could have pulled off, that version might not exist without A Hard Day's Night. The Beatles didn't just show him art, they showed him a way of being. And once he saw it, he never let it go, and maybe that's the bigger takeaway for all of us. Sometimes the things that change our lives don't look dramatic at first. They can be as simple as a movie, a song, or even a single line someone says to us at the right moment. Those sparks might feel small, but they shape everything. For Johnny Depp, it was a black-and-white Beatles film that gave him permission to be different. For you, it could be something else entirely. The important thing is to recognize when something lights that fire inside you, and to keep chasing it, no matter how strange or risky it seems. Because in the end, maybe it isn't about destiny or chance. Maybe it's about what you do with the spark once it arrives. Johnny's spark came from a Beatles movie. Yours might come from somewhere completely unexpected. But if you have the courage to follow it, who knows where it could lead. And it also makes you wonder about your own life, doesn't it? What if the thing that changes your path isn't something big and dramatic, but something small? A song, a movie. A moment you don't even realize is important until years later. That's the magic of sparks. They don't always look like much at the beginning, but if you follow them, they can light up your whole life. Now here's where I want to hear from you. Do you think Johnny Depp would have been the same without A Hard Day's Night? Or do you think something else would have eventually lit that fire? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'm genuinely curious. And if you love stories like this, you'll definitely want to check out my video on Johnny Depp's private world. There are details there you've probably never seen before. And trust me, it will surprise you. If this story touched you, give it a like, share it with a friend who loves Johnny Depp, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because just like Johnny, sometimes one small spark can change everything.